The world has changed. Commissioner Kevin Warren has made it clear for everybody the world has changed in college sports. This is what we've been discussing on this YouTube channel since August 10th and going back a couple years on our Twitter account at Flug Empire and at Minnesota 247. Kevin Warren, thank goodness, has finally made it clear for everyone to now understand. And I think he was sending a message. And last night when he did the HBO interview with Gumball, I think he was sending a message, a couple different messages to a couple different people. One was to Notre Dame. The other one was for some schools in the future to have Big Ten in mind when they're available to come on board. This Big Ten is creating a super conference. There's good in it, there's bad in it, there's a lot of good in it, but this is Kevin Warren's vision, and we talked about it since episode 1 of this channel. So go back if you haven't watched episode 1, a peek around the corner, go back and watch it. It's The World Has Changed. World has changed forever. We talked about the total deregulation of college sports, plus the economic forces of consolidation meeting together. You have an explosion. And Kevin Warren is explaining that in this interview that we are going to go over today. There should be no more questions now about, is Big Ten going to expand? Is the Big Ten just going to expand with 2 schools? We do not know the timing of this, although we think we have a good idea of what's happening. And we'll go through that in this episode. The reasons the Big Ten is not going to leave USC and UCLA left alone on an island. I think everyone has finally agreed to that. When we mentioned that Oregon and Washington and Stanford were targets a couple of days after, Big Ten targets a couple of days after UCLA and USC came on a board, I got a lot of heat because if Big Ten wanted those schools, why aren't they would be included in the deal? And we tried to explain. There's a number of reasons why the Big Ten went USC, UCLA first. First of all, they're the ones who called the Big Ten. And that's how it starts. We've talked about that. Number 2 is Kevin Warren, Big Ten president, and Fox Sports wanted to get this initial media Big Ten deal done, get it on board, get it finalized for a couple reasons. Well, the main reason was this. Kevin Warren said yesterday that he made a comment saying he looks forward to dealing with other big, I'm paraphrasing, other big business media companies and further potential growth of the conference, something along those lines. We went over it in yesterday's show. Because those media companies, Amazon, Apple, possibly ESPN coming back in and grabbing a piece of maybe a 4th window for the Big Ten, 4th window slot on Saturday. They wanted to see the lay of the land, who got what, how was that first deal finalized for them to come jumping back in to potentially get more Big Ten content as Big Ten's inventory potentially grows. There's a lot of reasons why things happen the way they did and the timing of it, and going forward, the timing of it. I think one of the big messages, there's a bunch of big messages today, but one of the big messages is for all those who keep saying that there's no school that brings more value in, that all the pies will get diminished a little bit. You got to start thinking differently, because this is about market share. This is about the Big Ten wanting to nail down the West Coast. This is about gathering more bargaining chips when you go to the bargaining table to discuss the future of the college football playoffs and the college sports in general. And there's no question about it that at some point the Big Ten is going to end this expansion, their expansion for a generation, by going back east where the demographics are growing, the recruiting, the athletes. They're going to go back east, right? They're going to finish off that Purdue, Maryland, Rutgers. They're going to finish off that eastern seaboard region. Kevin Warren said a few days ago that the Big Ten, going from Los Angeles to New Jersey and everywhere in between. So today we're going to discuss what Kevin Warren said on Real Sports HBO, the message that he was sending out and to whom, and the potential scenarios for the Big Ten going forward. Let's get to the potential scenarios. Some of this will be with intel that we have. Some of this will be reporting that you see on the national. And some of this, we're going to push the envelope on a couple scenarios that you are not hearing about being reported. Because our intel, which we had long ago, matches up to what the reporting is being done today. Except there's a little twist to what we have versus what the national reporting is saying. Just a little difference. That little difference could cause a major ripple onto its own. Okay? So let's first get to what Kevin Warren said for those who have missed it. Okay. First, Brett McMurphy. This morning, Big Ten's Kevin Warren tells Real Sports HBO he sees Big Ten having 20 members and paying players. Those paying players are things we have to resolve. This is Kevin Warren talking. We have to. So I want to be part of this conversation and will be part of this conversation of what we can do to make this better. We're going to go into exactly what Kevin Warren said, the exact words that he used at Real Sports HBO. Brian Gumbel asked Kevin Warren, could you foresee paying athletes? Kevin Warren, yes, yeah. Brian Gumbel, so you could foresee the day when Michigan, Michigan State, Indiana, Wisconsin are paying their football players, paying their basketball players, because they are in revenue-producing sports. Kevin Warren, those are the things that we have to resolve. We have to. So I want to be part of this conversation, and we will be part of this conversation of what we can do to make this better. Brian Gumbel, right now we are having major realignment in college sports. Kevin Warren. And I think during that period, there's going to be a lot of disruption, and that's okay. We need to embrace it if we want to make sure that we continually build college athletes in a position where it's here 100 and 200 years from now. Brian Gumbel, you're at 16 teams now. Could you foresee 20? Warren, I could, yeah. I could see perpetual and future growth. Perpetual and future growth. Okay? This is what we put down on June 16th, 2 weeks before the world found out that USC and UCLA were going to the Big Ten. We posted, and of course this is all information coming from BTM, our source. Deregulation coming soon, elimination of staff limitations, elimination of scholarship limitations for sports such as baseball and softball, massive increase in expansion for athletes' benefits, direct payments from school to athletes. This is why USC called Big Ten. These are all the reasons. Deregulation, conferences becoming more powerful, conferences making their own rules, their own decisions, their own galaxies. It seems like this is what the Supreme Court was kind of telling everybody, that the NCAA board was their decision making was unconstitutional. We talked about it on episode 1 and other episodes on Peek Around the Corner, how the big component of all this is going to be the paying of the student athletes, the players, the direct payments. It could come from schools to players or conferences to players. And this is the big change. So everyone has to start thinking differently. And I can see it in people's tweets and comments to me that people are now getting it. They understand it. This is the new world. Okay? Let's go back. Let's go to this one. This is July 28th. This is when in and around the time there was reporting that Big Ten's was cooling on adding other pieces such as Oregon, Washington, Stanford. This is BTM. Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Notre Dame Big Ten editions for 2024 is the goal, and quite frankly is in reach. It's right there. Too much money to be made to back away. Semi-final Big Ten Conference weekend, new revenue streams and other streams. It's too great to say no. Now, of course, in these tweets and these excerpts that BTM gives me and I put them on Twitter, it doesn't quite capture the whole essence of the argument or the discussion. That's why we had to open up this channel. But basically it's saying this is the goal. And can Big Ten reach their targets? Can they get them? Recently, we've had a reporting, and I would take it very seriously, from Sports Business Journal saying that Notre Dame is leaning independent and they've got this potential offer with NBC for $60 million a year for their Tier 1 content, which is their 6 to 7 home games. And I would, let's go back to, let's go back to this one. See, I think Kevin Warren is talking to a few different people here in this conversation with Brian Gumbel. One of the persons he's talking to is Jack Swarbrick and President Jenkins of Notre Dame. You see, the Big Ten is moving on. If Notre Dame doesn't jump on it, that complicates things. We've talked about that. And we're going to talk about it in this episode as we're going to go to potential scenarios. Right? We're perpetual growth, perpetual and future growth. There is no magic number. There's no magic number that the Big Ten could possibly stop at. It all depends. Right? It all depends on so many different variables. But I remember when people used to discuss how can't go past 14 schools because there's no other schools that can bring in more value. That's just not how it is anymore. It's all about gaining market share, setting up your conference, taking a short-term loss per school for a couple $1 million is worth future growth. There's something that is something that a lot of conferences, if you look back, just could not understand. They couldn't understand about the future growth of creating your own conference network. They couldn't understand the future growth of expanding your conference when you've had the opportunity, much like the Big 12 over the years. And I think Yormark has learned his lesson, and that's going to be an episode down the road where Big 12 is going to expand and attack this situation. And so this, to me, what Kevin Warren is saying here is a message to Notre Dame. We're going to become in a bigger conference. And when we talk about this window, this August 15th, October 15th, hot window, people say, well, where did you come up with those dates? Those are the dates we were told, so I put them out there. And now that it's August 8th, what is it, August 19th, only 4 days in the window, and it's getting hot, right? And we stated this in July. According in Big Ten's perception, now it doesn't mean the Big Ten's right, but Big Ten's perception of the situation was, boy, Notre Dame's coming aboard. They are, because this is their time of maximum leverage. If they jump on board now in the Big Ten, it's a lot better for them to do it now than 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. But we just heard Gene Smith say, I believe yesterday, that it looks like Notre Dame is going to stay independent football. And we've had other reports. So we're not going to spend any more time on Notre Dame on this episode. Okay? They're not jumping in. They're not jumping in. Big Ten did not attain their goals of Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Notre Dame. That's the intel we had. We shared it. And we shared it at the time and during the time when people said the Big Ten was cooling on these schools. And they were never cooling on these schools. Notre Dame was setting the clock. They punched the clock. Notre Dame looks like they're done with this situation for now. Okay? So let's go on to the possible scenarios, because that's what people want to hear. What we have heard, what we've been talking about for weeks, months, it's just a tiny bit different than what the national reporting is saying. First of all, let me explain to you where intel comes from, because we've never really even delved into that, because we haven't talked about how we were able to break the story about USC calling the Big Ten alone back in March 31st. That story is going to come out in a major publication. We've told you this before, and it's coming out real soon. I think in days, not weeks, days. But in that story, I think it will describe a little bit of where we get the information. I'll just say it now, because I'll give you a little a view of it, because when we go into the scenarios that we're going to discuss about the potential jump from 16 to 20 schools in the Big Ten, I want you all to understand where we are coming from at Peek Around the Corner, because it's a little bit different. BTM is short for Big Ten Man, and he's breaking stories locally and nationally for years, and he sits on a perch that we call the money perch. That's all about I can say on that. It's the money perch. Follow the money. Money is making more decisions now than ever before. This is why when the national reporter or local reporter calls an administrator and says, can I get your read on this? Can I get your information on this? That administrator used to be always pretty much give you really accurate information. Not so much. The decision making is coming from big money. The good of it and the bad of it. So that's the perch that BTM sits on. And the BTM and his associates don't get everything right. They don't see the whole picture. They see a big picture. They see it from a particular perch. When we talk about Peek Around the Corner, they see it from a particular perch, but they don't see the whole picture. They're not the decision makers. They're not in that room. The best we can do is tell you what we are hearing. And some of that is just real nuggets of information that's real that we can grab onto. And some of the stories that we have broken over the years we will discuss in later episodes, probably after this college football season is over. I know this article that's coming out of a major publication will probably talk about one other huge story that we broke and give you nuggets on how that was done. Okay? So I give you this because we're hearing a little bit different, and maybe we've missed on something here in the possible scenarios going forward with the Big Ten. If you read and listen to national reporting, and it's very good reporting, that Kevin Warren, the Big Ten presidents are evaluating Stanford, Oregon, Washington, California. And 3 of those schools, this has been what we've been saying from the very beginning. Stanford, Oregon, and Washington. We've never walked off that beam, regardless of what the national reporting was saying about how the Big Ten cooled on those schools. They never cooled. But we don't have any, we haven't received any, there's been no steam, no negative information about the University of California, Berkeley. We haven't received that. That doesn't mean it's not true. That doesn't mean that Big Ten 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now, they do this official invitation knowing that the schools are going to take it of California, Stanford, Oregon, and Washington. Okay? But we don't have it. From the perch that the associates that surround, peek around the corner, they're not hearing it or seeing it. And maybe that has to do with the certain aspects of California, University of California. Maybe their how do I say this? Their money is not talking. And that is very well could be true. There's other reasons why we possibly could miss this. And by the way, this hasn't even happened yet, so maybe we didn't miss it. I'm just telling you, we have not, this has been a long time now that we've been talking about Oregon, Washington, Stanford. This is a long time now that we were talking about USC, months before anyone knew that any of this was going on. We were talking a long time ago that the Big Ten expansion door was open and no one else was talking about it. So we've been on this for a while. You would think that if something about California was steaming that we would receive it, but maybe not. Maybe we've completely missed it. And maybe those are your 4 schools. Maybe the Big Ten attaches California and Stanford first, maybe Oregon, Washington a month later, maybe Washington and Oregon first, whatever. Now this is all with Notre Dame out of the picture, right? As Notre Dame comes back in the picture, that is the goal of the Big Ten, then this conversation is mute. But we're not talking about Notre Dame for the rest of this episode. So our scenario is different than the national reporting. Ours is, and you know this because we've been talking about it, we know Big Ten presidents want Stanford. We talked about the incredible value of Oregon, and they're being undervalued by many, but many on Twitter, many on other places. But Oregon is valued, and Washington is valued, and those 3 are in the target sphere of the Big Ten. But we don't have California. Now, California is a great school. It's the number 1 public school in the United States. Some people in UCLA say they're the number 1 public school. Whatever. California is, and their California school systems, the University of California is a huge engine of this country's economy. California is in an incredible location. Northern California, San Francisco. My goodness. Yes, that's very attractive. The Big Ten presidents want to rub shoulders with California. They want to share resources. They want to share the library resources. There are reasons why the University of California would be targeted by the Big Ten. I'm just telling you, we never got that information. And that we were wrong, if it happens to be that we were wrong. We just don't have it. If we got it, I would say it, but we don't. So I can't. And maybe some of the reasons is because, when the Big Ten expands, one of their missions when they're expanding is to expand that Big Ten network that they own, and especially Fox Sports, that they own the Big Ten network, right? Fox Sports owns 61%. The right-hand man of Jim Delaney was Mark Silverman. When Jim Delaney was commissioner of the Big Ten, Mark Silverman became the first president of the Big Ten network, and now Mark Silverman's the president of Fox Sports. That Big Ten network is their baby. They're going to grow it. And they want to put it into places in which the consumers will actually buy it. Be it cable, be it streaming, So there's a sense of the associations that are around the perch that BTN sits on. There's this perception that, there's a weakness there in how the Big Ten network would be sold in Northern California. And by the way, that includes Stanford. But we've gotten a lot of information on Stanford being a target of the Big Ten, which matches the consensus of the reporting. So we're not getting this California love. So let's say that we are accurate. Let's say if we're going to 20 schools here in the next year, we think it's sooner. We'll touch that right now, soon. We'll touch on that. We think there's an opportunity for the 20th school to be some school that no one's talking about. And I'll name off a few. Because that's what we do here at Peek Around the Corner. That 20th school, if the Big Ten is determined, if they get the money coming from new media companies, the drop in for like a fourth window or expand streaming package, because the streaming package in the initial contract here is limited. It has 8 football games, all run by Peacock. The expansion space could happen in streaming. ESPN can get back in the game, possibly. I do not think so. But that's a potential, or Amazon, Apple, or somebody else. Or one of the current media companies, partners of the Big Ten, can grow their content with the Big Ten. But I'll throw out a couple schools here. Again, out on the West Coast. You got Utah. Decent research university, AAU. And there is a respect factor between USC and Utah. That's what we've heard. There's a respect there. There's an institutional respect of Utah. There's our Arizona State. We have often said at Peek Around the Corner that Arizona State is that super wild card. They probably can't pass through the Big Ten presidents. But again, everyone's scratching each other's back, right? Big Ten presidents gets their back scratched with Stanford. And Arizona State, Kevin Warren has a soft spot for Arizona State. Right? This is about relationships. These decisions are not always made just on a spreadsheet. They're made by relationships. And according to relationships. Kevin Warren has a soft spot for Arizona State. Went to school there. He has spent time there. His family's there. Phoenix is a growing area. It has a huge amount of Big Ten alumni. The Snowbirds come from the upper Midwest and the Big Ten, and they retire in Arizona and the Phoenix area. Arizona State has a decent valuation from Fox Sports. We've talked about this. They're a super long shot, no question about it. Super long shot. So is Utah. But I'm throwing those two schools out there because from our perspective of things, we just haven't received that information on California. And if Notre Dame's not coming aboard, could you go to an odd number of Oregon, Washington, Stanford and leave that space open for Notre Dame? Could you run a 19-school conference? Sure you can. So there might not be a fourth school. There might not be a fourth school. But we're doing a speculation here. We like to think it's an educated speculation. And I would throw those two schools in the bin. A good bin. Arizona State, Utah, super long shots. But California piece we just don't have. And it's not like we haven't been reaching out and trying to get that piece to say, okay, yeah, California is that fourth school in line for the targets of the Big Ten. California is an incredible school. You can see why the Big Ten presidents would want them, of course. So maybe they're in there, but we just don't have that information. The timeline on all this, Kevin Warren has said this is all about timing. When is it going to get done? We know, we believe, we reported it before, that they're in the hot window. August 15th, October 15th. If Oregon, Washington, Stanford, they don't want to wait forever, Pac has to, the dominoes have to fall, and the next domino, if Notre Dame has punched the clock and they're out of the equation for now, the next domino is Oregon, Washington, Stanford. Everyone else is waiting on that, and Kevin Warren knows that, and the media companies know that. They want these dominoes to start falling, the rest of them. So, that's what we got today in this emergency broadcast, episode number 15 of Peek Around the Corner. The world has changed, and I'm happy from my perspective that Kevin Warren laid it out for everybody to see today. Just put it out there in this interview with HBO, Real Sports. He put it out there. Now everyone knows. Expansion's not done. And you know the reasons why. And how SEC responds to this. That is for another episode at Peek Around the Corner. If you like this content, please hit the like button. Please share this video with your friends. We would appreciate it. And subscribe to this channel. We're getting a lot of views for such a small channel. We need to get more subscribers to help us in the algorithm at YouTube. So thank you. From all of us at Peek Around the Corner, to all of you, until next time, please, you all take care of each other. Thanks.